that Rabbi said we do with Basi Legani every year, right? And I tried to speak in the Maimorim. Chav Daled is a particularly hard Maimed. It's a particularly hard Maimed. And I think the right way to put it is, it's so hard because there's so many different sugyas. There's so many, the Rebbe stops at so many different points and explains them. It's not like there was 2 or 3 or 4 points, it's like 6 or 7 or 8 points. And each point is a iyun. It's mamish a iyun. Mem Daled is interessant in my Mezeir, because in certain ways, the Rebbe breaks from the mold of the Basi Legani. There's certain things about Mem Daled which, if you wouldn't know it's a Basi Legani, you wouldn't think it's a Basi Legani. There's certain things about the Maimed which don't follow the regular pattern in certain paratim. So here's what we do. Every year we learn the Pedic, and the way I started was I review the Basi Legani till this point, and then we learn the Pedic, which is for this year. That's how we do it. And we have 2 weeks of today and next Thursday night, Mitzvah Shabbos. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. Okay, Kaidem called Eshazach is, as we all know, in Tafresh Pe Gimel, the Rebbe wants you to feed the Rebbe. So we now know from Chadakov's Rishimis that the Rebbe told him that the first time I saw the Fidik Rebbe was Chalamet Sukkot Tafresh Pe Gimel, and the second time he visited was Pashat Boyim B'Shalach. The Rebbe was not yet 21; he was 20. And Vias Vais Dois, it's hard to know for sure, but Vias Vais Dois, there's letters about that visit from the Fidik Rebbe to the Rebbe Tzachai Mushka. He went to see the Rebbe. It was Chassan and Zach. But he was from Fidik Rebbe, and he was there for 2 Shabbos, Boyim B'Shalach. So the Fidik Rebbe said those 2 Shabbos are Maimer. The Maimer of Pasha's boy started V'hi b'yetzem hayem hazeh yotzak l'tuvat Hashem eretz Mitzrayim. And about 15 lines into the Maimer, the Fidik Rebbe says, U'lohov en zeh yesh lahagim t'chil l'masha kosa Basi Legani chesikala. And then from that point, it's word for word our Maimer, Basi Legani, till the end. The Fidik Rebbe's. But then the Maimer of boy was 10 parakim. By us was divided up into 4 Maimorim, each one 5 parakim. For Yud Shvat, for Yud Gimel Shvat, for Purim, for Beis Nissen. Then the first Shabbos he said 10 parakim. And Pashat B'Shalach, I don't know how the Maimer started. He said the last 10 parakim. And by the way, you should know, we know where the Maimorim come from. The Basi Legani, the first 10 parakim Basi Legani is Tafresh and Ches Basi Legani. It's almost word for word. Tafresh Nun Ches from the Rebbe Nishma, it's almost word for word. And the second half, the Tzivas Hashem part and the Eitzres, is in Tafresh Pei, Pashat Boy. You can see the Maimorim. The Fidik kept from Tatum. The Fidik remember his father's Maimorim, and he added Hagos and Ha'oris. Sometimes the Ha'oris were very long, and sometimes the Ha'oris were quite short. And if I'm not mistaken, these 2 Maimorim, then there's not a lot. It's basically Maimorim from the Rebbe Nishma with a few Ha'oris. And the Rebbe was there. So the second time the Rebbe visited the Fidik Rebbe said the Basi Legani. And 27 years later, the Rebbe gave out in the Maimorim the Fidik Rebbe for his Estalkus. So it's very precise that when the Rebbe shows up, the Bereshtan Mo, the Fidik Rebbe says the Basi Legani, and this Maimer is, in the Rebbe's own words, the Tzavah of the Rebbe. The Fidik Rebbe's Tzavah is the Maimer Basi Legani. What does Basi Legani talk about? Basi Legani has 2 parts. The first part is the job. And the second part is who does the job. The job and the jobber, okay, if you will. What is the job? The job is also the job is to make for the Eibush Beis HaMikdash a Mishkan or Mikdash La Yizbarach. That's the avodah, right? That's the avodah. That the Eibush was in this world, and the Eibush left, and the Eibush came back. But when the Eibush came back, he said also the Mishkan Beis HaMikdash. I mean, there's different ways of learning it. Whether it has to do with Chet HaEgel, doesn't have to do with Chet HaEgel. The bottom line is, Moshe Rabbeinu built Eibush a small house, and the Eibush wanted a big house. How big is the house the Eibishter wants? But take kol echad echad Yisrael. The whole world should be his home. So even if you're going to learn that the also the Mikdash Shechanti B'Seichem is not connected to Chet HaEgel, in other words, Hashem gave the Mishkan Stam Azoi, but the Beis HaMikdash that Hashem told Moshe to build was small. And therefore, there's the avoid of Shechanti B'Seichem, but take kol echad echad Yisrael. In other words, what makes Basi Legani not just a Sipur Dvorim? What makes Basi Legani not just a nice story, you know? The Eibishter was here, we kicked him out, and then we invited him back in, and he came back in, and he moved into a house. It's a ma'aser. How is this not only a story? And the answer is because the Eibishter had us build him a home that was small, but the kavanah is to make that home bigger to encompass the whole world. And of course, there's two psukim, right? Tzadikim yirshu oretz v'yishkenu adoled. That's tzadikim mazechat el mabah because they bring the Shekhinah into this world, and then v'shachanti b'seicham. And one of the Basi Legani, the Rabbi says that tzadikim build the Beis HaMikdash. That's the pasuk. Tzadikim in the Medrash they bring both of these psukim. Tzadikim yishu oretz v'yishkenu adoled. And then the second pasuk v'asel the Mikdash v'shachanti means now that the Beis HaMikdash is built, you do the avodah inside the Beis HaMikdash. You understand? So, now that you know the job, which is to make the whole world in the Beis HaMikdash for the Eibishter, the question becomes, so what is the job? How do you do it? And in one word, the job is that it's kafir v'esapch. Don't run and hide under a rock. Don't live a life of holiness. You have to live a life of holiness, but you have to take on the world, right? You make it, you fulfill the purpose of making the Eibishter Beis HaMikdash. A day is kafir v'esapch, by bending and transforming klipa into kedusha. And he gives 3 examples. The first example is karbonos. You take an animal, and the animal and yourself, and you give it away to the Eibishter. The second example is shtus. You take atzei shitim, boards that are called shtus, and you mahapech shtus de li'umad and the shtus de gedusha. And the third example is krashim. Basi said krashim al mishkan atzei shitim emdim. You take krashim, take sheker, which of the world, and you mahapech it to a keresh and a kesher, and you make it into a basement for the Eibishter. This is the first half of Basi Legani, and it lasts 9 parakim. This is the first half.
That's not skafia.
Huh?
These 3 examples are all skafia.
Iskafia v'esapra. It's 2 steps. Iskafia v'esapra. First you bend and then you transform. The pratim, mer von dem is it negeh jetzt. Then comes the second half of the Basi Legani. Who makes the dir b'tachtenim? And the answer is the dir b'tachtenim is made by the tzivos Hashem. Right? What's the amount of tzivos Hashem? The diuk is, it's not just eved, it's chayal. Not just a servant, not a slave, but a soldier. A slave is ready for Kabbalah, a sale. And a soldier is ready for Mesilas Nefesh. So the diuk is tzivos Hashem, that the Yidden they're not just Avdei Hashem, they're tzivos Hashem. They're not just the army of the slaves of the Eibishter, which are ready for Kabbalah sale, but the tzivos Hashem, they're ready for Mesilas Nefesh mamish. And the tzivos Hashem, they're the ones who do this. So the whole second half of the Basi Legani is talking about the tzivos Hashem. The first half talks about what the mission is, and the second half talks about how the mission has to be accomplished. So in order to explain it, the Rebbe starts discussing Milchama. The Frierdiker Rebbe does, Milchama. And he suggests that there's 2 kinds of wars. There is a war called Lishlel Shalol V'Lovus Voiz, where you fight a war to take from another country, to acquire wealth from somebody else. And whenever you fight a war, and the purpose of the war is to acquire wealth, or to acquire land, to acquire people, you have to evaluate the possible gains. It's a war for profit. If it's a war for profit, the investment has to be less than the return. So you have to calculate how much you're going to lose, or how much you're going to, it has to be worth it. But then there's a Mechamas Nitzach. And Mechamas Nitzach means a war that you can't lose. In other words, there's nothing that you won't do because you can't lose this war. You can't lose this war, your Ismet is finished. In one of my moms, the Rebbe says the meaning of Mechamas Nitzach is that it has to happen as the way the king wants it, down to the tiniest minutia. It can't just be because that the king wants it. Every single detail has to be exactly what the Melech wants it. And when you're fighting a Mechamas Nitzach, there's new rules altogether. Number 1. Yeah, number 1. The Melech is machnis atzme b'tachsisi milchama. The king doesn't do what kings normally do, which is b'yesik and yichudei Allah, and let his generals fight. This war he fights himself. He goes to fight this war. Number 2, he's mevazbeis kol ha'eitzes asher otzru avesav avesav avesav. He dispenses, he gives out treasure that's been collected by him and his father and his grandfather for generations, that's so precious and so sublime that you don't even show it to people. Not only you don't use it, you don't even show it to people. And now, because of this Mechamas Nitzachon, you not only show it, you give it away recklessly, bizbuz, because whatever it takes to win the war, you're going to do. And then the third thing it doesn't mind is mashlachayv min neged. The king throws away his life. You show in a lot of the Maimorim, the Rebbe doesn't like to say the words mashlachayv min neged. The Rebbe says lashon mesaken eschayev mitasamach. He risks his life. He puts his life in sakana. The Frierdiker Rebbe says mashlachayv min neged. And the Eshter Yon, the Rebbe spoke that Inyan. But this year's Basi Legani and Chavdal, I think the Rebbe changes from Masha Chai V'Negev to Mesake Leitchan Sakona. So the Frierdiker Rebbe develops a concept of a war that you can't lose. And that's the continuation. Right? The first half of the Maimed is Kafia V'Hapcha, making a Didli Yisbarach B'Tachtenim. And the second half, remember, is saying this endeavor to do is Kafia V'Hapcha, make a Didli Yisbarach B'Tachtenim, is one of those things that it has to happen. It can't not happen. That's the Kavanah Sabriya. It's a Mechamas Nitzach, and it must happen. And therefore, kings behave in ways that they normally do not behave. Now, all three of these points, the Frierdiker Rebbe gets in ganz verkocht in the middle one. He starts this 12th Perek Yud Beis, to explain what is the meaning of the Eibishter's treasure. And this goes on for at least 5 parakim, maybe even 6. Especially explaining what's Oitzer. And the Nakud of Oitzer, in this Maimer of Chav Daled, I think different Maimor I'm saying, different Eifana, but in this Maimer, the meaning of the word Oitzer means it's hidden. No one knows what it is. It's hidden. Basamecha. And because Oitzer is hidden, it's higher than Eidin Seif. That's how the Rebbe develops it in this Maim. Again, in other Maim may be different, but this Maim, that's what explains Oitzer. So the Frierdiker Rebbe says, Lahavin Eitzel L'mayla. You have to know Eitzel L'mayla. Is the way you explain Eitzel L'mayla, he says you have to first Magdim Shit Tekun Ezeir, Ein Seif L'mayla, Adin Ketz, or L'mayla, Adin Ketz, or L'matamat Adin Dach. Right? Ein Seif is one thing. It's not two things. Ein Seif is godliness. But Ein Seif has 2 characteristics. No matter how high you go, it's higher. And no matter how low you go, it's also there. So in Perek Yud Beis, which was to my mind from 2 years ago from Chav Beis, they have a Pashat, it's Pashat Stamavov. It explains what Eidin Sof is. Perek Yud Gimel and Yud Daled, which was last year and this year, he explains Ein Seif Mata Dein Tachlis. And next year, Perek Tezvav, he explains the Maila Dein Ketz. So the Rebbe observes that the Lashon Tekun Ezeir is Ein Seif L'mayla Adin Ketz, and then L'mata Adin Tachlis. And the Frierdiker Rebbe explains it backwards. He doesn't explain it in the order of the Tekun Ezeir. First he says Ein Seif L'mata Adin Tachlis, then he says Ein Seif Perek Yud Gimel Yadal, then he says Ein Seif L'mayla Adin Ketz and Perek Tezvav, even though the Tekun Ezeir shet fakert. So the Rebbe says the reason the Frierdiker Rebbe reverses it because Ein Seif L'mata Adin Tachlis is easier to understand. Ein Seif L'mata Adin Ketz is a lot harder to understand. So by first explaining Ein Seif L'mata Adin Tachlis helps you understand Ein Seif L'mata Adin Ketz. Or that Ein Seif L'mata Adin Tachlis is higher than Ein Seif L'mata Adin. Ein Seif L'mata Adin Ketz is higher than Ein Seif L'mata Adin Tachlis. And Oitzer is higher than both. Oitzer is higher. Oitzer is not only higher than Ein Seif L'mata Adin Tachlis, Oitzer is higher than Ein Seif L'mata Adin Ketz. So if he wants to be Mafli Oitzer, he breaks it down. There's a Madrei called Ein Seif L'mata Adin Tachlis. Then there's a higher Inyan Ein Seif L'mata Adin Ketz. And Oitzer is higher than both. So for these 2 reasons, the Frierdiker Rebbe reverses it. First he explains Ein Seif L'mata Adin Tachlis, and then he goes L'mata Adin Ketz.
The 2 reasons again, one is because Ein Seif
it's much easier to understand, and it leads you to it. And the second is because it's a lower and a higher Inyan. And since Oitzer is higher than both, so first explain the lower Inyan, and then you explain the higher Inyan, and then you say Oitzer is even higher than L'mayla Adin Ketz.
Oitzer next year?
Oitzer, no, next year is L'mayla Adin Ketz. Oitzer is at least Tezayin, could be even Yud Zayin. The Rebbe develops this. It's the biggest sugi in the Basi Legani, this Ein Seif L'mayla Adin Ketz. It's a Tekun Ezeir.
Second reason why it says Ein Seif L'mata Adin Tachlis before the L'mayla Adin Ketz, different than Tekun Ezeir, is because what?
Because Oitzer is higher than both.
Oitzer is
The
later.
lowest level and we go higher.
I asked him why Ein Seif L'mata is coming before Ein Seif L'mayla. Tekun Ezeir says Ein Seif L'mayla and Ein Seif L'mata, then Oitzer.
The Tekun Ezeir doesn't talk about Oitzer.
Okay, fine.
The Frierdiker Rebbe talks about Oitzer.
Okay.
So if you want to explain what's higher, you start from the first level, then you go to the second level, and then you get to what's higher than both.
Ein Seif L'mata is lower, and then goes higher.
Yeah. So in the Maimer of Memdale, the Rebbe says like this: there's 2 parakim dedicated to Ein Seif L'mata Adin Tachlis, Perek Yud and Perek Yud. But they're opposites. Now they will stay there. There's two prakim dedicated to Ein Seif Ma'at Adin Tachlis. Perek Yomit, but they're opposites. They're opposites. How are the opposites? The Nekuda of Perek Gimel is that Hashem is hidden in the worlds. Ein Sof Lamat Adin Tachlis is that there's even Klipa, lowest worlds. This Perek Yadalad is Hashem is revealed. It's the same idea. Ein Seif, godliness, is Lamat Adin Tachlis. But in last year's Perek, the point was Hashem is hidden even in the lowest klippos. And this year he says, no, punkt vaket, that the Eibush is revealed even in the lowest klippos. Ein Seif, Lamat Adin Tachlis. Wherever you look, you'll see the Eibush. As they get this. Wherever you look, you'll see the Eibush. As they explain. Huh?
You just have to look.
Or you have to pay attention. Right. Whatever you have to look, you have to pay. But it's not just there, it's revealed. That's what the Rebbe develops. Ein Seif, Lamat Adin Tachlis means that Eibush Elokus is everywhere. And in our Perek he's adding Elokus is begili everywhere. As they get this, as they get the Maimer. So the Maimer of Tafshin Chav Daled, is going to discuss the idea that Ein Seif Lamat Adin Tachlis means that Hashem is revealed everywhere. The Maimer of Tafshin Mem Daled, it's the Rebbe asked the kasha on the Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer. And the kasha that the Rebbe asked in the Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer is that we know that the Eibishter creates the world not with oyer, that's in Yonei Gilui, but the Eibishter creates the world with shame, that's in Yonei Helam. So the Rebbe begins his Maimer by telling you that this Perek is about Gilui, and then after he tells you that the Perek is about Gilui, that's the kasha. How come the Friedrich Rebbe in his Maimer discusses Ein Seif Lamat Adin Tachlis, that all things get their chayes from oyer or from chayes, and not from koyach, when in reality the Eibush says in Alter Rebbe that in Tanya that the Eibush creates everything through shame, and shame isn't even helam. So in other words, the Friedrich Rebbe is avoiding a very, very important thing. He's describing Ein Seif Lamat Tachlis. Why? Hashem is revealed everywhere because Hashem creates everything. Hashem creates the kind of way that He's revealed. So but it's not true. Hashem creates and He hides because creation is not through earth. Creation is through shame. And the Rebbe gives verschiedene answers. The final answer that the Rebbe gives is the Eibush creates the world through oyer, and the Eibush creates the world through shame, that we should be magal the lakus of shame also, and the lakus of shame is higher than the lakus of oyer. That's the Maimer of Mem Dalet. It's interesting Maimer. You don't usually have this. Basically, the Maimer of Mem Dalet is not explaining the Basi Legani. It's challenging it. The Maimer is a kasha. The Rebbe says, I don't know if Rebbe, but why does he say it's not true? The creation is not from oyer, and chayes, the creation is from shame. And his teretz is that we're magalda l'kus of shame, and since shame is an even helam, so its market is even higher, so it's even higher gilui. But that's how the Maimer of Dalet goes. He really challenges the Basi Legani, doesn't undo his challenge. He adds to what the Friedrich Rebbe says another idea, the from shame and the gilui l'kus from shame. We'll get to it. But now it's time for us to do some learning, yeah? The good news about these shiurim is we can stop when we want. Why? We have next week. Wasn't
it like Shem Havai and Anakin? So why is it such a big kasha?
No. Shame doesn't mean the Eibishter's names. Shame means Yosef Yitzchak, Moshe.
Oh, I thought you said the Eibishter's
name. V'heistu with Yosef. Yosef. V'heistu, what's your name? Hananya. Shame means the name of each nivra. No.
Through his name.
No, through our names.
Through our names.
It says in Tanya that every single creation, the Eibishter creates b'chol rega with that name. So the shaila is the name is hidden. How does the Rebbe say Ein Seif Lamat Adin Tachlis? Because the Eibishter creates with oyer. And when you look at the creation, you see the oyer. In Tanya says the opposite. So the whole Maimer, Basi Mem Dalet, is challenging the Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer. It's not explaining it, it's challenging it. And the teretz doesn't take away the challenge. The teretz says, the Friedrich Rebbe says that the whole world, the Eibush is revealed because they revealed oyer. And I'm telling you that even deeper than oyer is shame. So why does the Friedrich Rebbe say oyer if it's shame?
Deeper than his oyer?
Because shame happens b'derech havdalah. I'm not teaching it whole chassidus on 1 foot. Oyer is me'in amar, it's only ha'ara. Shame happens b'derech havdalah, so it's etzem. And the maskana is that we're going to be magal the l'kus of shame also. And we're magal the l'kus of shame also. It's a higher gilui than the gilui through oyer. That's how the Mem Dalet Maimer. I find this unusual in Basi Legani. The Mem Dalet Maimer is the Friedrich Rebbe questioning what the Friedrich Rebbe says, and he never undoes the. In other words, he's not explaining how the Frierdiker Rebbe says it right, he adds to the Frierdiker Rebbe the idea of shame, which in this Perek is not Bechlal. So it's very, very unusual, I think, very unusual. And the most unusual thing to me in this Maimed is the Rebbe in Mem Dalet starts off typical Basi Legani, and by the way, he brings Neira Lila al Bnei Adam, he brings that the Avedas had to happen. They made sure those Avedas had to happen. Chet HaDavirishin, they had to happen. Those certain Avedas have to happen. Why? Because the Eibishter wants Avodah. If they don't do those Avedas, then the Kavanah happens without Avodah. And Avodah has a Meile, the Masa Tshuva, because of his Kafi Veshapcha. So those Avedas had to happen because the Eibishter wanted the Kavanah to be Dafka, the Kavanah of Tshuva, and his Kafi and his Hapcha, not Tzadikim. So those Avedas were going to happen.
So then you're mixing Bechir and Hashgacha Pratis.
Okay. Yeah, and then he starts talking about a little bit, talks about Shtus, about Kedesh. He talks about Tzivas Hashem. Tzivas Hashem, the army. And when it comes to Tzivas Hashem, he's Meidech. Tzivas Meidech. What's the Zarich of the Tzivas Hashem? V'acharechen yetu b'rechush gadol. And the rechush gadol is the Tzutze Kedushas, the Birurim. That the soldiers come out of Mitzrayim and take with them the Tzutze Kedusha. And he brings the famous word that the Pare chased after them to bring them the Tzutze Kedusha. Pare comes after the Jewish people. He chases after B'shalach Pare Esa et Midgeshik the less the Tzutze Kedusha v'ditim gelost in Mitzrayim. So he mentions Tzivas Hashem, and he mentions the Tzivas Hashem he mentions Kabbalah Seil and Mesiras Nefesh, both words a few times, Kabbalah Seil and Mesiras Nefesh. And he explains why you call them Tzivas Hashem, because their inyan is to be invited to Tzitz Kedusha. But he doesn't mention Milchamas Nitzachim. He doesn't mention, the whole thing about war is missing. The Rebbe in the Maimer Tafshin Dal Mem does not mention Milchamas Nitzachim. He doesn't mention Machnes Atzme Mitachsisim Mechoma. He doesn't mention Bizbus HaEtzes. He for sure doesn't mention Masakin Eschaya, Vashach HaVinegev. He doesn't even mention the Tikkun Ezeyah. Ulahaven in the Eitzel Lamayla is Lahagin Tchalam Masha Kosev Tikkun Ezeyah. In Seif Lamata Lamayla Neketz Lamata Dachas. The Rebbe doesn't even mention Tikkun Ezeyah. He doesn't mention Tikkun Ezeyah. He just goes straight to our Pedic. He talks about Tzivas Hashem and goes straight to our Pedic. Why? Because what's Tzivas Hashem var in the Tzutzis? What's our Pedic? The Tzutzis that are stuck. And where do you have it? In shame, not in oyer, which our Maimer doesn't have. That's how the Rebbe's Maimer develops. But anyway, let's now learn the Maimer Pedic Yidalid. And obviously, most of what we're going to say is going to be from Chav Dalid, because the Maimer are. The Ikirus, the Rebbe is explaining the Maimer Pedic Yidalid. In the Dalid Mem Maimer, the Rebbe is challenging the Yidalid. V'hine, Bekolze means, in spite of the fact that there are very, very, very low klippas, very, very low klippas, very, very low klippas. And these low klippas get their chayas from the Eibishter, like the Rebbe explained last year. And by the way, you know, when the Rebbe talks about klippas, yeah, how many klippas are there? Klippa number 1 is klippas nega, yeah? Klippa number 2 is Shorach with Meir Sagamre, that the Eibishter created. What's klippa number 3? If a Yid doesn't have Aveda. Because it says in Tanya Perich of Dalid, Ki'ilu Keifa Ba'achdusa Yesa Mimena. A Yid doesn't have Aveda, Yitush Kodmach, he's worse than Klippa. But the Rebbe says there's many kinds of Avedas. What is the worst Aveda? And this is Barichas in the end of the last Perich. Last year the Rebbe spoke about Friga speaks about Barichas, and the Rebbe brings it in this year Barichas also Lefiyerach. Is when you use Teda to say against the Teda. In other words, this klipa is rois based, rois agabre. There's the klipa of an avera made in shoel vayol, and in klipas that have to do with avera, the worst avera is when you use the teda to pasken hepach teda. And the Frierdiker Rebbe says, he says God is there too. Nishna is the Eibishter in klipa, the Eibishter is an avera. Nicht nur als Eibishter in Aveda, the Eibishter is an Aveda, wenn man nicht so sein Teile for an Aveda. The Eibishter is there also. That's how the Rebbe develops. The idea of Klippa. The Rebbe develops the idea of Klippa. So, in spite of all of this, the Eibishter gives life. Meaning, even though there's such low Klippas, and the Eibishter has to give chayes to all these Klippas, so again, if you're learning the Maimer from Mem Daled, and once you're the from Daled, you can say this Pshat Chav Daled also. What he's saying is not that Pshat Hashem is everywhere. Hashem is revealed everywhere. If you look close, you'll see that the Eibush is revealed everywhere. Okay? Now, So the word va'ata has to weiter astire. In Tov Shin Chov Daled, the Rebbe explains that the word ata means tzimtzum. In Tov Shin Mem Daled, the Rebbe explains that ata means atzmus. Eat your heart out. In Tov Shin Chov Daled, the Rebbe translates ata, that ata means tzimtzum. Why? Because there's in Tanya that ata is Asius Aleph bis Tov, and Hem is Oisapeh. It says in Tanya. So the Rebbe says the word ata means not atzmus, it means Oisius. Oisius is tzimtzum. So the Rebbe in Tov Shin Chov Daled, ata means the Eibishter is mitzamtzum himself. And the way the Rebbe says it in the Maimed, of course everything happens from the Eibishter. But it can happen from the Eibishter as the Eibishter is. And then come for the Eibishter as the Eibishter hides himself in Seder Ishtalshos. And the diak of the word va'ata is that the Eibishter is Mechav the worlds, Mechayim have the worlds in a way of tzimtzum, right? What did he say in Mem Daled? That ata was an atzmos. Ata do, atzmos ain't sav baruch hu, v'atek. Ata is higher than a name. Ata means atzmos. So b'meil in Tov Shin Daled Mem, he says you should know that what is the taich of this post that not only the Eibush is everywhere, the Eibush is everywhere revealed. That the way the Eibush that creates the world, even the klipas, and even the klipas that do with Aveda, and even the klipas that have to do with the worst Aveda of all, which is Magal Lepola B'tesh Leik Alocha, Nishtot, the Eibush Dotten Faran, the Eibush Dotten Hashem is revealed. You understand? So there's two va'atos. There's the at of Tov Shin Chov Daled and the at of Tov Shin Mem Daled, and there's a different va'at. Va'ata machayes kulam, they give life to everything. So the Rebbe explains.
Because he's saying how the Kedusha finds itself in the lowest places. So Ata is the Atzmus, Atzmus finds itself in the Oisius.
Yeah, but the meaning of Ata Atzmus is that it's without a shinoi. It's without a shinoi. And Ata Oisius is with a shinoi. Listen, I'm not going to argue, but that's how I see it. And the Rebbe says, "V'ata machayes kulam." Right. One of the things they have in Hasidus is, what's the difference between chayes and havoya? Right. What's the difference between your guf and your neshama? Your guf is a daimim. It's a lump of clay. Right. It's a shtick fleish. Right. Your guf is nothing. In other words, when a person looks at the body alone, like you look at a stone alone, there's nothing compelling you to say that there's something more here than the Gashmi. But when you see life, there's a lot of my modem, and the Rebbe is medayik in this, both of my modem. When you see life, life begs the question, where do I come from? It says in Chassidus, every living thing knows that it's not just chemistry and biology and electricity. If you're alive, especially for a human being, you know that there's something about your being living which has to do with a neshama. Meaning it comes from outside the universe. It's not physical, it's ruchniistic. But in this world, you know that your life is spiritual, but you don't know where that spirituality comes from, unless you're Kedusha, you understand? So the Rebbe says, the fact that the Frierdiker Rebbe brings the Pos Vata Machaye is a further ayah at the purpose of Perek Yud Daled versus Perek Yud Gimel. Is that a Perek Yud Gimel, the Rebbe is explaining how the Eibishter is everywhere, even though there's klipas, but he's hidden in those klipas. That's why they're able to be klipa. And in Perek Yud Daled, he's saying, no, the Eibishter is in the word klipas, and he dart in the nefin for his galus. And one of the diyukim is the word V'ata Machaye. Right? V'ata Machaye es kulam, you give life to everything, except the pasuk. The ha'oris, aid, and the key, that there's a trace of divine light, harinimshach, which is brought forward, lahaves, to create, ulahaches, and to give life, as kol and Evrahim, every single one of the creations, from me'ayin, from a non-existential state, liyesh, to an independent existential state. Right? So he brings the pasuk Machaya, and then immediately translates it not like the pasuk. First made Machaya, Mahava Machaya. So the Rebbe in the Maimer says that the Alter Rebbe is the one who says this. Al Tikre Mechaya Ela Mahava. Now we know Al Tikris from Shas. We know Al Tikris from Mishnas and Braises. Here you have an Al Tikre from Alter Rebbe. This Al Tikre doesn't say in the Med. This Alter Rebbe is an Al Tikre. Yeah. We say every day in Davening, Al Tikre Halochas, Alichas Halochas. Al Tikre Bo Noyach, Ala Boy Noyach. Here you have an Al Tikre from Alter Rebbe. Al Tikre Mechaya Ela Mahava. So the Rebbe says, I'm more in the kavod. What is the meaning of Al Tikri? What does it mean, Al Tikri? There's rules of learning Chazal, yeah? There's rules of learning Chazal. And the rules of learning Chazal are explaining Plukim, yeah? If the Eibishter wanted to say Halachas Eilam instead of Alichas Eilam, he would have written Halachas Eilam. If the Eibishter wanted to say v'chol boy noyach with Hashem instead of bon noyach, he would have said boy noyach. So he says bon noyach. I'll take it. He doesn't mean what he says. I'll take it. So wissen. Meint nicht das, meint pesadisch. If he meant to say it, let him say it. What kind of spiel is it? So of course you all know the Maimon from the first Maimon Basi Legani when the Rebbe spoke Yud Aleph. Al tikra vayikra vayakri. So the Rebbe brought right away that it says in Kol Yashas that when you have the rule of limud of al tikri, you read it both ways, not just one way. So it's not the pshat you're saying the first word is wrong. It's saying that there's another word, it's an additional word. But here the Rebbe adds a higoyen. The Rebbe says that some ideas have a chitzonius and a pnimius. And the purpose is the pnimius. But it's hard to see the pnimius. So you start off with the chitzonius. And the chitzonius leads you to the pnimius. Like v'chol bo nayich. Right? But the Eibishter's kinder. What's the Eibishter's kinder? We're makabel from the Eibishter. What al tikre bo noyach ala bo noyach? We're the Eibishter's builders. We're mashpiyah to the Eibishter. It's the idea that a Yid is makabel from the Eibishter is much easier to understand than there's an idea that a Yid klayochel is mashpiyah to the Eibishter. That's why it's al tikre. He starts off saying something which is easier to understand. And then he says, go from the easy to the hard. Al tikre bo noyach. I'm Hashem's child. My father's teaching me Teda. Ela boy noyach. We're building up the Eibishter klayoch. And the same is true of tikre haliches and halachas. And the same is true here, says the Rebbe. Of the two things, how Hashem gives life to the world, and the fact that Hashem creates the world yesh me'ayin, it's a lot easier to preach that Hashem gives life. Because life you see, order you see, beauty you see, chayes you see. When you look at the beautiful world, you know an artist made it. But when you look at a rock, you look at the choymer, at the material, it's nothing. So there's al tikri. The pasuk says, "V'ata machayeh." Because when you look at the life in the world, you look at your neshama, you see the Eibishter immediately. I'll take it a machayeh el mahave. Go from the chitzonius to the pnimius. Go from observing life in the world and come to recognize that not only is the life in the world, the madrega of putting a neshama into the guf, but that the Eibishter creates the guf himself. Because safe calls safe, that's deeper. Yesh mayayin, creating the guf, is a deeper inyan than putting the neshama into the guf. Because this is yesh mayayin and this is just yesh mayesh. But you say it in this eifin. So the Rebbe says that this one line of Frierdiker Rebbe is menamis to all of this. He starts with Ata Machayes Kulam and he translates Lahaves Lahachis. So the Rebbe translates this one line to say that the Frierdiker was being menamis to what it says in Tanya, Al Tikre Machayeh. The pasuk says Machayeh, but you should know pshat in the pasuk that first you come to see how the Hashem gives life. And then you have to come to see that it's not just giving life, it's partially giving existence. As such, lahaves or lahaches is kol nevroyim meyayin leish. Everything the world of Bishah creates.
Isn't mahaves a prerequisite for lahaches?
In Zman it is.
So why you
But in Hasaga it's not.
But Hasaga, you see lahaches, the first is
That's right.
lahaves.
That's right.
By a diamond there's no lahaches, there's only lahaves.
So it says in Tanya that there is.
So that's a chiddush.
In for Narida, right? That is a chiddush. Right, it is a chiddush.
But what you would see is you would see lahaches.
Lahaches. So the Al Tikre Machayeh Mahave. It's a beautiful word. And it's a klal. In this Maimed, the Rebbe Posh explains this klal from Al Tikri in a beautiful way. It's a shtickle nigle Posh. What's the title of the klal Al Tikri? The Eibishter says in the pasuk a word which is easy to understand. Vayikra, Avram taught the people of the Eibishter. Al Tikra Vayikra, El Vayakra. He taught so well, other people were also teaching. It's one leading to the next. That's how the pasuk is written. It says in Tanya that when the Eibishter creates the world, it goes so low as ha'ara, that a trace of godliness is present. Now, and according to the Maimer of Memdad, you have to add one word: revealed. B'chol ha'nivroyim v'ha'neitzim v'ha'nasim, in all the creations of Elam Abriya, of all the creations of Elam Yitzira, in all the creations of Elam Asiyah. So it takes taka, a trace, a tzimtzum of Ein Sof. But wherever you look in the creation, you're going to see a lakus. Wherever you look in the creation, you're going to see Get L'chayt. The Eibush is revealed everywhere. Shu'a'er v'achayes olaki, it's the light and the life of a lakus. And in the Maimer of Dalet Mem, the sugya that starts off this whole business of shame. Tafshin Dalet Mem is one ikar word. How come the Friedrich Rebbe doesn't mention shame in this Perek? But before he mentions it, he says that we have from other places Oir, Chayes, and Koyach. Oir, Chayes, and Koyach. So Oir and Chayes go together. And Koyach is separate. And you'll see later on that himself is going to separate Oir and Chayes from Koyach. That's why I have over here these two words. Oir v'Chayes Elikim. What's the difference between Oir and Chayes? Oir is save of Kalam. And Chayes is Mamala Kalam. So both of them are Dvekas. Both of them are connected to the Eibush, they reveal the Eibush, they're close to the Eibush. But Oir doesn't adapt to go into a Keli. Chayes adapts to be able to go into a Keli, right? So the Rebbe says, even though it's ha'ara, in the end there's a Eir, which is like a makif, save kalam, v'achayes, which is like mamala kalam, and a pnimi, or the key, shenimshe b'chol and evroim, which is brought to the creation. And again, I'm going to say this every line. According to the Maim of Tov Shin Dalad Mem, it's not only the presence of Lakus everywhere, the Lakus is everywhere begilui. That's the Chiddush of Perek Yadal. The Perek you see Lakus begilui even in Klip. He brings the Apostle, the Gemara, Hazor no mefanes, the Eibush gives Zenis and Panosa, Mekanye the aiming from the horns of, but the aim is like kind of a mythological creature. I don't know what you want to call it, a unicorn.
A deer, no?
The aim is an antelope. It's for sure not a deer. The Shah is which antelope? It's a I don't know, an oryx. It's an aim, huh? Unicorn sounds right, yeah. Ad beyakinim to the eggs of lice. So the Rebbe explains a Kabbalah what this means. The Rebbe in his Maimed explains Kanye the aim is the highest medeg of kedusha, and beyakinim is the lowest medeg of klipa, and ours make them makoides. Everything's makoides. It's beautiful, but he pushes a tight eyes. What's at the aim? At the aim is an animal. That's a very high madreg. Of that, I think it's Kesed. The keren, the horn of the aim is higher than the aim itself. So the Rebbe brings from Kisvei Arizal that the aim is Ksodim. It's 10 Ksodim, I think.
Doesn't say Pesach Mikdash? Re'im, Shechem, Re'im is the Echta Pesach Mikdash. Has to be like the Re'im.
B'cher Sheirei Hodalei v'kanei Re'im Kanav. That's written by Yeshua. The Beis Hamikdash is a different word. Okay, in this yet. But he says, so the horn of the aim is like Kesed Shebekesed. So the Friedrich Rebbe brings a Maim Mechazal, brings a Gemara. I have a son-in-law who's an extraordinary young man. There's one footnote from the Rebbe on this page. So his Hachana for Yud Shvat is to ask himself why the Rebbe made this order. If the Rebbe can bring Gemara stuff, Sach Gemara to bring in. If the Rebbe says Re'ei Avodah Zarah Gil Beis, it's not pshat. It's a mocker for the fact that the Eibush gives Mezenis to Panosa. So he's bothering me. Whatever, for some reasons he's bothering me. But why? What's the difference between Mezenis and Panosa? But the Rebbe brings here Re'ei Avodah Zarah Gil Beis. There's something about Mezenis and Panosa. Kani Re'ei. In the highest, in Kesed itself, it's the highest Kesed. We give chayes to them. And Beyakinim goes on Klipa. How does Beyakinim go on Klip? He brings two ideas, and one of them is that Kinim is Begematria Kuf Chof. Kinim is the numerical equivalent of 120. And 120 goes on the Kuf Chof Siruf of Shem Elikim. Shem Elikim has 5 letters, not 4 letters. It says in Sefer Yetzirah that a word with 5 letters you can write in 120 different arrangements. If you have 5 letters, like the Elikim is 5 letters, Aleph, He, Lamed, He, Yud, Mem, right? Put an Aleph first, and then you can have 24 Tzirufim. You'll have 6 Tzirufim with the Lamed first, 6 Tzirufim with the He first, 6 with the Yud first. Then you put the Lamed first. So you have 24 times 5 is 120 Tzirufim. So it says in Kabbalah that the Kuf Chav Tzirufim Shem Elikim goes on Klippe. Particularly the last Memches, the last 48. Because Elikim is 5 letters, and each ois has 24 tzirufim. So you have Eile Yam, right? Sometimes it's Mi Eile, sometimes it's Eile Yam. Mi Eile, Mi is higher than Eile. Mi is Bin Eile Zoh. But Eile Zoh, Yam is Malchus. So you have the 24 tzirufim of the Yud, 24 tzirufim of the Mem, and that's Admas B'nei Chom. You know, Chom is Memches, 48. It goes in the last 48 Tzirufim of Shem Elikim. So Be'ekinim, Kinim is Begematria, Kuf Chof, that goes on the Klippus, that the Eibush gives Chayis from Kanye to Eim, which is the highest Madregas of Kedusha. In other words, it's a Maimah Chazal, it's a Gemara. But the Rebbe says, what's the pnimis of this Maimah Chazal? The Eibush does Mazdanu finds from the highest Madregas of Kedusha, which is Keser Sheba Keser Hayden Ishtashlus, at Beyakin, and Beyakin goes in the lowest Klippas Mamish. Weiter. The Ha'oid, V'hachayis, that the light and the life, and again, notice, the opposite of Oid Chayis in this Maimah is going to be Koyach. In the Rebbe's Kasha from Dalad Mem, it's going to be shame. But Oid and Chayis go together, because in Oid and Chayis, the Alkus is Begilui, and in Koyach, it doesn't have to be Begilui. Meir v'nimshach, it shines and it's drawn down, gam b'madreg, eis ta'achtein tos madreges, v'eis hashvem, the very, very lowest. How low? Not only into the lowliness of klippus that the Eibishter created, even in the lowliness of klippus that man creates. And the klippus that man creates are lower than the klippus Eibishter says in Tanya Perich of Dalit, that a Yid doesn't have Aveda. It's worse than klippus itself. Right? Side the Ruchni is the klippus, the Rebbe says the Ruchni is the klippus, Yedei Esrib Einim Lord Guf Chumri. Yedei Esrib Einim. And he's not made it. But over the Eibishter's word, Shalei b'shechut Hashem Makam Baruch. The Ruchni Zika Klippas have three limitations. They don't have a guf, they know about Hashem, and they'll never do something with the Eibishter's instructions. Even if it's Mishlachas Melach Shabbat, it's a bad thing. A Yid doesn't have Veda is worse because he's in a guf. He forgot about the Eibishter, and he's being made, he's going against his Teva. That's in the beginning of Adalit. Later on, the Rebbe brings Nachmeder. Not only is a Yid doesn't have Veda, a person doesn't have Veda, lower than a ruchne klipa is lower than a gashmi is kemaima yitush kodmach, because it says upkedose is borech shamra rucham, the teva of wild animals that are representative of the lowest klipas. The Eibishter is guarding them. They shouldn't go lower than the teva, like the dogma from Daniel gave out, that the lions wouldn't kill him. And when a person doesn't have Veda, he's going lower than his teva. So a Yid who doesn't have Veda is worse than klipas. He's even worse than the things that are getting higher from the klipa in the gashmizik world. And of all the Avedas that a Yid could do, the lowest Aveda is when he uses the Teda to be against the Teda. That's how the Rebbe says it. So the Rebbe brings, or Komeshe Kosov, he brings the part, but the middle Rebbe, Maisam and Shaidas. There's a high Shaidas and there's low Shaidas, and low Shaidas, the Makar of Klipa, you could look in the Maimed. Im Esek Shamayim Shamata, if I'll present myself to the heavens, you're there. Vatziyah Sha'el, even if I present myself to the deepest abyss, Hineka, you're there as well. So the Rebbe says, Vos mein Sha'el, She'el mein Gehenim. Vos mein Gehenim, a klipa was a mentioned b'shafen. That's what it teaches. Why? If no person does no Aveda, there's no need for a Gehenim. Because the Gehenim is a place of Oynish. Oynish is a tetzah of Aveda. So, Vatziyah She'oli Neka means you go to a place of klipa which the Eibishter didn't create. It's a klipa that only exists because a person doesn't have Veda, and he's adding a new dimension of klipa which is lower than the klipas the Eibishter created. You go to over there, you find the Eibishter also. And then the Rebbe brings Nachavart, which is mamish crazy. That in the Nevuas Chana, she says, Moirid Sha'el Vayal. Hashem Moirid Me'emisu Mechai. Hashem Moirid. It's Chana is talking about her life. And she was so low because she had no children, and the Ganzamais and the Eibishter Rachmanas got. So you have a shidna l'shenis. One of the l'shenis, Moirid Sha'el Vayal. The Eibishter lowers us till the abyss and hicks us out. So the Rebbe teaches, what's it, Moirid Sha'el Vayal? That the Eibishter wants to gain in Gehenim, that we're talking about Veda. Why did the Eibishter make a Sha'el? In other words, why does the Eibishter allow that a human being could make a bad Bechira and be going that there should be a place of Einish, a klip of Gehenim, which is lower than the klipas the Eibishter made? Naturally, it's also for the sake of Ayol. There's a Yerida Zu, Tzerach Aliyah includes the Yerida and Aveda. That's the Rebbe teaches it. So this is the Pshat. Ain't safe lamata adain tachlis. You can find the Eibishter not only in the klipas that the Eibishter created. You can find the klipas which have to do with the Eibishter, with the bechira chavs of people, because the Eibishter gave us this bechira. Nicht haben so misgabas and a film fällt da rein, so man kann alles kriegen von dort. As the Rebbe teaches this pasuk im esak shamayim sham ata vatziyah she'elinek, and he says the zehu is bonus gedela. This is an incredible greatest bonus. Begduas Hashem in thinking how great the Eibishter is. What's this? Bananus? Shenimshach b'chol seder ishtalshelus. The Eibishter brought all of seder ishtalshelus, mi madrega le madrega, from step to step, ad madreges beruim ayeser shvel, the very lowest creations, which includes klippas, including a klippa which a person makes using the Torah against the rest of the Eibishter. Ubi acheles kol adam v'adam. It's within the possibility of every human being. Gama yeser poshet. A poshet be a simplest person. Ladies has to know this, because rei gedula savaya. We all see the greatness of the Eibishter. And that's the diak. Why do we see it? Because not only is the Eibishter present everywhere, the Eibishter is present everywhere in a way of gilui. And that's the chiddush of Perikut Dal, or Perikut Gimel, in Ein Seif Lamata Adein Tachlis. He's everywhere, and he's everywhere Bezgalus. Ukemavur b'di maskul v'eira hanal. It says in the mind from the v'eira, in the inyan of God la Hashem b'ira lekeinu, the Gedul Savaya Meriban, that the greatness of Hashem is demonstrated by the many creations, and that's a mashal, it's a metaphor, it's a cloud for the idea that whatever the Eibishter creates, even the biggest klippas, soft, kol soft, it brings to Gila Lakus in the cover of the Eibishter. So he says, this contemplation, it causes in a person an incredible reaction. Right? The word of Paul means to react, to respond. From the fact that wherever you live, you could see evidence of the Eibishter. You know, I taught this Maimed 20 years ago. Must have been this page. Even the this lesson. I was teaching in 770. 20 years ago, when I taught in 770, on a Sunday, I had 20 or 30 or 40 women. Now, if I teach on Sundays now, the women are starting to come, but I didn't have those. In the earlier years, when I first started teaching at Akadesha Elam, so I then saw in a science magazine a mashal that I thought was incredible. They have places where they store nuclear waste. Yeah. What does that mean? We used to have, we should really still have, that's my opinion, energy made from nuclear energy. In other words, nuclear reactors, that they use these chain reactions to produce energy. It's cheap and it's clean, if you're careful. If you're not careful, at a much cheaper cost, a much cleaner cost than petroleum. They're all shut down now because of the different accidents that happened. But they used to use nuclear power plants for energy. So these nuclear power plants are made from radioactive material. Plutonium, these are very heavy metals. They have a very atomic number, and they're very radioactive. Radioactive means that their whole chush is hepech haseder. The meaning of a living thing is order. That's what meaning organism means. The way they produce energy is by oscillating, by moving. So it's mamish death. Radioactivity is the word. It's the opposite. A living being needs order. Radioactivity means breaking order. It's death. So it's very, very dangerous. It's very, very dangerous. So they use these rods and then they get used up. I don't know what it means they get used up. They're no longer producing energy. So they have to bury them. But they have a half-life of 10,000 years. It's a long time, 10,000 years. And they're radioactive for 10,000 years. So they find places deep under mountains, not near faults, not near tectonic plates, and they're hoping it'll be safe in these places for 10,000 years. So there's some place in Arizona, under some mountains, they bury these rods. But every once in a while, they open up the place where they keep it, the vault, to make sure that it's not leaking. And they opened it up, and they found organisms there. They found living creatures that are living, that can eat radioactivity. You know what that means? There's creatures, the Abishah made that a living, that can eat death. It's not to be believed. It's unbelievable. So basically, the way the scientists, we don't live in a planet that has life on it. We live in a living planet. The Abishah created life on this earth. You create a physical thing that muhusei is mavis, and someone's going to live from it. So they were writing that maybe they could use these organisms to eat up this radioactivity, and they have to worry about 10,000 years. These guys have babies quickly, you know what I'm saying? When they run out of food, what you'll do, there's another problem. But imagine that. So I used it as a marshal. For in Seif Matal Tachlis, wherever you look, you see life. You have a place that's designated for death itself, and you find life there. Ein Seif, in other words, the diuk is not just Elikus is everywhere. Elikus is everywhere is Galus. Made it in Gehenna is for Angilia Elikus. And the Rebbe says, I'll read those words again, his bonon luzeis oisei spoilers gedel benefesh. It makes a person react with great excitement. Mizeh shareim b'muchash mamish. You see vividly, you see b'chush, Elikus. Now, Sataka, how is this? How is it that the Eibishter creates such low creations, like he said in Perikut Gimel, till Klippas, till the worst kind of Klippas, and wherever you look, not only is the Eibishter present, but the Eibishter is Be'ez Galus there, and this is the teretz. The Kol Zehu, this idea, that wherever you look, not only does the Eibishter have to be there to give life and creation, but the Eibishter has to be there in a way of his Galus, is Lefi Shoha'er, who ain't safe b'yetzim. Godliness is ain't safe in a way that's called etzem. In other words, it's ain't safe, it's not kamos, it's eichos. Godliness is not infinite because it goes on and on and on and on. Godliness is infinite because its basic definitions has no limit. And because it has no limit, listen to these ACS, al kain ain't safe gam kain lehis pashtuse. There's no end to its expansion where it radiates. Beribay al madreges v'ashtalshus, on the multiple steps and the chain reaction ad lamata mata mamash to the very lowest levels. And then he adds more. First of all, it's ein seifes pashtuse, and second of all, ubekomokim shunim shachom espashat, no matter where he goes, eine beispoilus ve'eine beistanus. Eine beispoilus means he touches everything and nothing touches him. He changes everything and nothing changes him. And at the next page on the top, which we can do next week, first line, turn to page 1 second, the Rebbe adds one more thing. Last words of the first line. Lefi she'eni mis'aref. These are 3 expressions. The first 2 expressions gets 2 parakim, and the third parakim it's a third parakim, its own parakim. Yeah? The Eid ain't safe is ain't safe at the level of etzem. Etzem means it's ain't safe for you cannot be changed. Godliness goes everywhere. It touches everything. It's invested in everything. And of course, when you speak about the word oir and chayis, oir means it comes everywhere and remains the same. Chayis means pnimi. It goes everywhere and it adapts. But ein seif be'etzem means that as much as it goes, and as much as it changes, as much as it adapts, doesn't go, doesn't change, doesn't adapt at all. Ein seif be'etzem does not allow his spoilers. It doesn't allow shinui. And it doesn't allow his harvest. Godliness is everywhere. But God's relation with the creation has an incredible impact on the creation, and the creation has no impact on him. It's a one-way touch. He touches without being touched. In physics and in chakira, right? Kol meniyam isnanea ba'atzmei. If I'm moving you, I have to be moving myself. Okay, but the Eibishter ain't safe. Ain't safe for the special to say. Ain't by his spoilers. Godliness goes everywhere. It adapts, it makes available everything, but as much as it changes to give chayes to the whole creation, it itself makes completely unchanged. And we'll do this next week, Mr. Shem.